Good afternoon. It is, I want to make sure I get the right, 5:10 on February 4th, 2026. And the District of Columbia State Board of Education working session is now called to order. The working session is being streamed live on the State Board YouTube page, members and the public. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Director Butler, hello, and please call.
Representative Chamberlain.
Present.
Representative Dinkins. Representative Moses.
Present.
Representative Warren. Representative Best. Representative Chang.
Present.
Representative Colson. Representative Boulay.
Present.
Representative Henderson.
Present.
Representative Johnson Law. Representative Thompson. Representative Williams.
Present.
President Patterson.
Present.
President Patterson, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Director Butler. A quorum has been determined and the State Board will now proceed with the meeting. I have the opportunity to be the first person on the agenda and I get to give my leadership report. I have sent it out to members, staff, in your emails. I sent it out a little bit earlier today before I hit it this way, so it is in there. If you want the long version, I'll try to just hit the highlighted areas, so that you guys know what happened in January. So we had 2 meetings. We met with chairman, of course, and we also met with possibly our team, during the month of January. It goes backwards because of his position as the chairman first, then although Ozzy, that makes sense too. So we met with the chairman on January 29th, just days ago. The major items that we do in our meeting with the chairman is we give office reports. In those office reports, of course, Butler gives her report, OMB gave their report as well. They talked about different contacts that they have had. They had 78 turned into active cases, and Ward 6, 8, 2, and 5 have the most cases. They have 1 vacancy in the spare. We also talked to the chairman about subpoenas that have been given to the State Board of Education, because some of the social medias are being sued by the District of Columbia, and they in turn want to ask us for stuff so that subpoena records that we do not have. Either the capacity because of our small staff or a general counsel or our staff, so for expertise. So that we told the chairman is basically we're going to send it back to the Office of the Attorney General, saying that we don't have those availability capacity to respond to them in that manner and seeing how we will put that all to Attorney General. So we also talked about the high school graduation requirement task force. What will be noted is that we'll have 2 changes that will be coming up on the task force. We have a person that replacing the person that we leave for Workforce Investment Council, and we also have a person that's coming on board from the PCSB. So that was discussed as well. We told them at that particular time, the survey that we have out for the graduation requirement task force, the survey was still out and get available in February to collect information. That's all. Right. But we also discussed with them the Education Simplification Amendment Act of 2025. The details are in I won't forward that. Chairman in turn then goes second. He asked another question. Basically, he wants to know who's testifying at the hearings that we're going to be having. What else he asked us some just overarching questions. What was some of our budget concerns, if any, as he initially does that. We also had a discussion about some October issues that we were talking about with budgets. So that was our second day. Then we had a great meeting with also the state superintendent, which some of the faces that I see in front of me were in that actual meeting. In that meeting, we talked about the standards, which we'll be discussing tonight, the attendance and chronic absenteeism, high school graduation task force, what major issues that we talked about, and Aussie busing. I'll bore you guys with all of the details of that. Again, they are in the notes. We appreciate Aussie always being a great partner with us. Just making sure they answer the question and you can get that constituents. And so just want to thank you for that meeting. And that was the 2 meetings that we had during that month of January. Look to my colleagues and ask if there are any questions in particular. You do have the notes in your emails if you're able to pull them up. But I'll ask the question, are there any questions from my colleagues? Are there? Yes, sir. Mr. Henderson.
For the chairman's meeting, any discussion of any of the legislation that we have sent over?
No, we really didn't get into any of the legislation at this particular time. We just did kind of like a gloss over the transition in leadership and just some regular questions. We didn't have a whole bunch of questions, but we did not pick up any of the legislation that is recently. I know the one you're maybe referring to as the government's authority and everything like that, that did not move in. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would second that. Is the plan for leadership, in meeting with the chairman to meet every month or bi-monthly at this point?
Yes, so the chairman sets the schedule, we do not set the schedule, he will only meet with us every other.
Yeah, and we try to update them as much as possible as his frequency.
Got it. Yeah, so if that does end up being in March, I think that we can kind of get a pulse check of where the board is at that point, but I do think it's incumbent on us to advocate
Okay.
for a hearing. I don't think that that's asking too much given the
I agree.
long duration of this.
I agree with you, Representative. That's not asking too much after all the work that we put literally years.
Yeah.
That went into it to make sure that it was not too intrusive, but just asking that we as a board can do work that our constituents want us to do and have the information to base it off. So I agree with you what I'm saying.
And then on two other issues there, with regards to the principal and teacher retention. Two things with that. One, he had asked what the board's reaction to the hearing was. Was there anything that was shared? And then two, was there any other insights that he shared about his reaction other than being displeased about the elementary school principal situation?
I always try not to get too into the details or reactions and stuff like that. What he wanted to know was, have we watched it? What was our thoughts about, some of the responses from, whether that's DCPS or other folks and people who testified. I try not to get too, like I said, too into the details because people have very strong feelings or passions and things to say in certain ways. But that was basically the gist of it. I would say overall, if I were to summarize it, Representative Williams, is that I don't think he was too happy with a lot of the answers that were given to him from whether it's DCPS and other areas. So he reflected he wasn't happy.
Okay. Yeah,
Am I summarizing that correctly?
That's an accurate
Okay.
summary. I think he was that also at the hearing, if he was satisfied, so
Right.
he completed the concerns.
yeah, I think from our vantage point, like, Dr. Henderson and I testified at the hearing and, it's also aligns with our work in the Educator Excellence Committee and one of our strategic priorities
Right.
that we want to keep pressing them on, supporting early career educators. So I think there's a lot of room to do that.
I think he would be supportive,
Thank
judging
you.
by the tenor of the conversation.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's important.
All right. Were there any other questions? Thank you guys so much. Now I return to my director to give her report.
Mr. President, I think we have the agenda items for the next meetings.
That there's.
Okay. Then executive session.
Okay, so what Jen writes is rates here for me, what she's written here for me. I wanted to ask, for our agenda items for the upcoming policy and EME meetings, both which take place on February 11th. For Oxford, we are currently having one agenda item, PE standards follow-up, which after their presentation. And for EME, we currently have one agenda item, excused absences. The members have a suggestion for any additional agenda items for either of those meetings, DME or OSCE, as we get ready to meet them later this week. Next week. Yes, sir.
I'm curious for the DME, if we could bring up like some of our concern around attendance recently. and also check in on the current status of the Everyday Counts Task Force, just where the recommendations are this year. Dr. Colson's on it now, as we know, but I sat on it for 2 years and just trying to really see what the outcomes are for June and where we're at, because chronic truancy and is still super high. So that would be one thing that I would want to us to follow up on. And then also just if, and we'll probably hear this from Aussie throughout the report with the CCLR committee, but just any graduation timeline updates with regards to managing that process.
Thanks, staff, for taking down notes, so thank you, Representative Williams. Any other things you would like us to bring up, either with me or Aussie? Our upcoming meetings. Representative Henderson.
I think one question for DME, just for moving forward, like over the past week, week and a half, we had the snow storm and response, and I was hearing from charter leaders, and I think others were as well, and kind of getting the sense that they felt like they didn't have as clear a route to getting help, you know, compared to DCPS, so as the relationship with DGS, and maybe a straighter through line to getting public works response. And so I just wonder, you know, if the DME sees a potential to offer some guidance or way of streamlining charters for coordinating help in schools in the situation.
And I would agree with you, because as a Ward 8 resident, I know we experienced some inequities as far as the two sectors, as what was plowed, how they were plowed, and those kind of things. So, we would agree with them.
So aren't charters responsible for their own facilities, unlike DCPS?
No, okay, so, yes, they are for their own facility.
And grounds? Because those are
Not public grant. Now, they're supposed to do that, but they don't have the same amount of money. So what he's asking, I think, I'll push back a little bit, is that if those like sidewalks in front of schools.
Or just like sidewalks in
Or-
front of homes.
Right,
Residents are responsible for their own sidewalks in front of their homes. Charter schools are responsible for the sidewalks in front of their building. That is their property. So it's like, if someone trips on the sidewalk on ice in front of any local homeowner who owns that property, or who is leasing that property, now if they're renting, then they're responsible. That is the district law. So, and so for schools, like DCPS schools, for example, those are technically owned by the city is responsible for moving that ice. I don't know if the same thing applies to charter schools that are separately and privately owned, or we have these facilities.
Representative Henderson, are you talking about like the sidewalks in the surrounding areas, like for example, Eel Haynes? Like, yes, Haynes has the grounds right there at the school, but like right across the street, you know.
Or not,
Yeah,
again,
sidewalks and streets
yeah,
Yeah.
so like.
that are outside of the.
That like, things that are appropriate to the actual school facility or the school grounds. The
And I-
city has no legal obligation to.
and I
allow
hear
those.
you on the technical aspect, correct. But what I will also say is that being that most of the LEAs are not the same size as some that DCPS of course. But even some of the larger ones, their abilities to do that is not as great, in like staff, first and foremost. And of course, we want to make sure that the streets are given the same priority as any others.
But no, the streets are definitely city
Sorry.
property, but this is in grounds.
But here's the point. Any other thoughts?
I will echo what has already been said. I'm not sure if I missed it, but if I would just be interested in hearing their thoughts on potential, reclaiming the virtual option. Because we don't know what will happen. We've already used a couple of snow days and we don't want to be in school till July and making up days. So I know that other school districts around us were able to quickly switch to virtual learning. So it would be good to see where we stand and if that's something that they're considering.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. All right, that being the case, thank you guys for. We will now turn to our executive director.
Good evening, members of the DC State Board of Education. Since last month, SBOE team had focused on meeting the agency's performance oversight questions. and starting demolition on our renovated office space. Our Deputy Director, Jim Riones, was invited to join the Integrated Math Advisory Panel on policy committee organization. And both President Patterson and I accepted invitations to join the strategic planning convening for DC Community Schools hosted by the Coalition for Community Schools and IEL at American University. I conducted an onboarding meeting with the board of news vice president, Representative Goulet, and members of the SBOE team participated in the quarterly Compact 24T3 coalition meeting. We are excited to fully align the board's work on graduation requirements with other post-secondary and career pathways work happening across the city. Rounding out this month, Roma and I completed and submitted our quarterly financial report with our AFO team. As we approach the final year of this board's term, I again encourage you all to schedule one-on-ones, coffee chats with me or a member of my team to ensure that we are meeting your needs and expectations. We value your insights and want to make sure that we are aligned on what success looks like for the road ahead. Last but not least, I want to recognize our longest serving team member, Mr. Roman Babb. Roman has dedicated 25 years of service to DC across 3 agencies: the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, and the DC State Board of Education. Congratulations, Roman, and thank you for your unwavering commitment to excellence and public service.
Thank you.
That concludes my report.
Does anyone have any questions for our director? And again, Roma, you know how much we appreciate you, as a whole for everything that you do for us, on a regular basis. Keep us safe, make sure that our budgets are tight, we're in compliance. Thank you so much for all your dedicated work across, different agencies that you work. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, sir.
I will now turn, the next 30 minutes of our meeting over to the team from our citizens from the meeting. They're going to present about revising the DC physical education standard. Floor is now.
Thank you and good evening. It's nice to see everyone. Thanks for braving the cold. Obviously, it's excited to be here this evening. I imagine the slides will come up here in a second to discuss updating the district's physical education standards. I am very pleased to be joined by Rachel Sadlin, our interim assistant superintendent for health and wellness, the division which oversees our physical education standards and supports the work, and Jess Duncan, who is the content lead for this work stream. Are the slides displaying for you? Great, thank you. So in a moment, Jess will present an overview, which will include some background information about physical education standards, or physical education standards, and an overview of Shape America's updated national PE standards, including the main shifts and the newest iteration of the standards. We'll talk about what we've done to date to prepare to revise AC's PE standards and the next steps that we've planned. Once Jess concludes, the 3 of us will be happy to answer questions about those next steps or other relevant questions you may have. We have 2 overarching goals for tonight's working session with you. First, we want to make sure that the board understands the what, why, and how behind our vision for updating DC's PE standards. And second, we want to ensure that we're aligned on next steps so that we have a clear path forward towards adoption. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over.
All right, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everyone for allowing us to join your meeting this evening. So to start us off, I'll provide some background on our standards and our proposal for our revision. So our physical education standards, or PE standards, were last approved by the state board in 2017. The national physical education standards are from the Society for Health and Physical Educators, or Shape America. These were recently updated back in March 2024. So this really provides DC an opportunity to update our local standards so they are in line with these new national standards. Shape's PE standards really provide a clear, skills-based, and age-appropriate approach to physically literate individuals, so they really have the knowledge, skills, and confidence to enjoy a lifetime of physical activity. Next slide, please. There. So our proposal is to really adopt the Shape America National PE Standards largely as is. Our rationale for this is that Shape America is really the national leader in health and PE. They serve as the voice for more than 200,000 health and PE professionals across the US. To revise the standard, Shape has gone through a very extensive process. They convened a 12-person national task force that included PE experts from K-12, schools, districts, as well as higher education. They also went through multiple rounds of revision for their PE standards. All of these were, each of these rounds were submitted for national review. The great thing too about Shape America is that they are, besides releasing the standards, they continue to release tools and resources that really support states, local education agencies, schools, and the educators to implement these standards with fidelity. And also our current 2017 PE standards were largely informed by Shape America standards at that time. So this follows the precedent that DHCC has set. It also aligns the precedent with other states. So to date, Maryland, Oregon, and Vermont have all recently revised their state standards and have adopted very similar to us, largely as is the 2024 Shape National Standards. And New York and Connecticut are another example of while they updated their standards back in 2020 and 2021, they did align their PE standards with the current Shape standard at that time. Next slide. All right, so now we'll shift into a bit of a deep dive on Shape's PE standards. And during this, we'll review a couple of 3 key changes that Shape made and then take a closer look at each of the standards that are proposed. So for Shape's standards, their new standard, the organization really focuses on 4 domains, and the new standards have 4 standards that align with each domain. The first one being the psychomotor domain. So that's really focusing on the development of physical movement, motor skills, and coordination. The second standard is focused on that cognitive domain. So this is the acquisition and application of knowledge, so that students know how to move one's body with ease and confidence to support lifelong health. The third one, standard will focus on the social domain. So really, this provides the practice and then application of skills that foster relationships, teamwork, communication, and problem solving. And then the fourth standard is going to focus in on this affective domain. So this is the development of skills to really understand your own personal emotions, values, and attitudes, and motivation, and how you explore those and develop those skills to use those to engage in meaningful physical activity. So what means the most has the most value for you to really contribute to a lifelong physical activity journey. To note that the previous standards did include these 4 standards plus a fit standard that focused on fitness. This fitness domain is now embedded in these 4 standards. So it wasn't lost, they just sort of incorporated it within these 4. Next slide, please. And this key change you can see illustrated here on this slide. So the shift from those 5 standards to these 4 standards that focus on each of those 4 learning domains really helps to streamline the standards. On this slide, you can see that in the second gray box on the left, that was the previous fitness standard. And that is the standard that is now integrated into the other standard. Next slide. Another key change is this focus on a physical literacy journey. So really a primary focus of physical education is the development of physical literacy in our students. So this is the ability for students to be able to move with confidence and confidence, provide a wide variety of physical activities, as well as multiple environments and settings. So it helps them develop as a whole person. So for these revised standards, what SHAPE did was shifted from just this idea of physical literacy to really emphasizing a physical literacy journey. So the shift really then focuses on the ongoing acquisition and application of those knowledge skills that are necessary for a lifetime of health and meaningful physical activity. And this shift was really made, and was an important focus point for SHAPE because they wanted, physical literacy is not something that's just achieved or is a fixed point in time or an individual. This is instead really a lifelong endeavor. It involves as an individual grows. So this provides a much more holistic approach to physical education, considers the individual student, their development, and also to build and maintain skills for the type of physical activity that they are most interested in. And then in addition, this also recognizes the importance of social and emotional learning and development and how that can be really key as part of physical activity and for child development. Next slide, please. And what the last key change you'll see illustrated on this slide is a shift from grade specific to grade band indicators. So what you'll see on the slide in this top table is a screenshot of how the current standards look. And then on the bottom, how the proposed, the shift looks in our proposed standards. So in that top one, you can see that they're grade specific indicators versus the proposed standard shift to those grade band indicators. And this shift is really important for a couple different reasons. One, she made this shift as motor skill development is not age dependent, but really dependent on the student's opportunity to practice a skill and the amount of encouragement and instruction they receive to refine that skill over time. So the grade span learning indicators then are able to support this principle by encompassing multiple stages of development. This also allows teachers to provide a more student-centered approach in the implementation of the standard and allows flexibility for the teachers to develop their unit and lesson plans so they can meet the students. Next slide. All right, so for these next couple slides, we'll take a bit of a deeper look at each of the 4 indicators. Each indicator is rooted in a specific theory or set of competencies and accompanied by a rationale statement or what the students will learn. And then we'll see on each of these slides an example of what the grade span learning indicator looks like for each standard. So for standard 1, this focuses on that psychomotor domain, which is rooted in the hourglass model of motor development. So this really outlines the phases and skills and how motor development that the grade span learning indicators are based on to help create that clear progression and framework for educators. Next slide, please. For standard 2, this is the one that focuses on the cognitive domain. It's rooted in Piaget's theory of cognitive development. And in this one, this is where students are really using their knowledge and movement, applying their new knowledge and movement concepts, tactics, and strategies across a variety of environments. This knowledge then helps students become more versatile, efficient movers, and really apply that knowledge and health-related and skill-related fitness so they can enhance their overall well-being and support their own physical literacy journey. Next slide. For standard 3, this focuses on the social domain. This is rooted in Erickson's stages of development, as well as social and emotional learning competencies. The SEL competencies that the standard is going to focus on are ones that are a bit more external to the self. So we can think about social cultural awareness in this one, our development of relationship skills. And really, this standard is focused on those social skills that are needed to exhibit empathy, respect for others, maintain relationships. Students really in this standard are building communication, leadership, cultural awareness, and conflict resolution in a physical activity setting. And then next slide, please. And for our last standard, this one on the affective domain. So the conceptual basis for this one is looking really at a lot of our SEL competencies, ones that are very mostly internal to self. So we're thinking about self-awareness, self-management, also responsible decision making. And this one will also include competence, motivation, and self-efficacy. And really this is for the standard, students are looking to understand how movement is personally beneficial and then how they choose to participate in physical activities that are meaningful for themselves. So this is really about finding what physical activity and what movement they enjoy so they can build that skills and carry it on throughout their life. Next slide, please. All right. For this next section, we will shift into looking at the revision process that we have taken to date. So our first step was to, once released, to review the national PE standards, and then we determined the recommendation to really want to move forward largely as is. We did consult with local experts during this process and received feedback on early drafts. And then we made some minor edits, and this included the uses of words, phrases, and concepts, so we can make sure we're providing alignment to our already adopted DC and SEL standards. An example of this would be we shifted to using self-regulating strategies instead of techniques in standards that reference management. We wanted to make sure there was relevance to DC learners, so that might have been a small shift in some language from, let's say, backyard games to yard games, and then also to improve verb choice for consistency and clarity. Next slide, please. There is one indicator where we are proposing a substantive change. You can see that original language in the first point at the top. And really the proposed language is then to shift. So we have a grade band progression. And you can see the proposed shift in the language in the table. So the first one, the bullet point is that language was across all grade bands. And now we've just, in this case, adjusted the language. So there's a progression for the different grade band levels. And okay, this is the only indicator with a substantive change from Chase indicators. Otherwise, it would just those minor language changes, as previously discussed. Next slide, please. All right, so for our standard revision process, looking to our next step. So back at the beginning of January, we provided an overview of the PE standards and this revision process at our monthly LEA leader meeting. We are here tonight with you all to discuss our revision process. And what we plan to do is on February 16th, open for public comment and feedback on the drafts and have that remain open through March 13th. After that process, we'll review and incorporate public feedback. In May, we would love to be able to come back to you all and present the draft standards, as well as discuss and continue to amend the standards based on any continued or SBOE feedback. And then we'll take those back, we'll update, and then in June is our target for presenting the final standards for approval so that we can publish those, begin to share them out with schools in the summertime. And then in school year 26-27, we would look to begin implementation of the PE standards, but would not expect full implementation until the following school year of 2027-28. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a bit of a closer look at that public comment timeline. So you can see the first and top point are that opening and closing date of February 16th and March 13th. But what we do want to do in that time is also to hold 3 public listening sessions. The first one, we will focus and try to recruit for our DC health and PE teachers to attend. The second for our LEA and school leaders, and the last for the general public. Of course, if while focus on certain groups, if someone can't attend one session but still wants to attend, they can come to a different listening session. We are also, as these are open to the public, invite any SBO members who are interested, welcome to attend these listening sessions. Our website will be updated with both a form to submit public comment, as well as registration forms for all of these listening sessions. Next slide. And with that, I will pause and open up the floor for any questions you all might have for the three of us.
Anderson?
Hi, thank you. I have three questions, I think. First, just to clarify, the health standards are separate from physical education. Right. All right, the second question, with the standards for the 9 to 12 band in particular, how well does that match with the required 1 credit hour for graduation? Because I don't have any sense of the equivalency of, like, you know, the number of standards that I'm looking at versus, like, in real time. Is that feasible for the 1 credit hour?
We do believe that is feasible for the 1 credit hour, for the graduation standard. We also believe that, it's typically like 1 credit hour is applied for PE, and then this is, the amount of standards we have now, and that, shift into the grade band indicators also makes them more efficient.
And then last, the thing that made me think about this was looking at the swimming standards that are in here. And seeing how it's like, if a pool is available, you would demonstrate skills in a pool, and just obviously demonstrating that skill in a pool is a very different thing than the alternative. And just wondering about equity in terms of, you know, which schools will have access to pools. And also just thinking, probably this doesn't just apply to swimming. What are the other areas where there might be concerns about the differential in how schools can implement standards based on their access to facilities, and just what you're thinking about that and how you might ameliorate those discrepancies.
Sure, so I think, and Heather, would you like to add to this as well? I think as part of our listening session and our work with LEA and school leaders is also really, as we dive into these standards, talking with them about where they see there may be some they have some questions or access challenges, and being able to understand those better from them and then support them. So, and that's also why we want to make sure we're not just, okay, hey, we're gonna adopt these in June, we're gonna tell you about them in July and August, and then you have to implement them at the beginning of the school year. So really giving a nice long way for schools to be able to implement these standards.
Yeah, and I'd love to piggyback. I agree with everything Jess said. Yeah, we recognize that facilities look different across the city, especially for charters who are using unique spaces. And so we really believe that swimming is an important skill for students to acquire. And there are creative solutions to go out to DC's DPR locations. And so some of our implementation guidance will include ways in which to take those sorts of field trips and to access other facilities available citywide. But yes, our listening session, we really do want to hear about feasibility from our school leaders and staff to implement that. But that's why that is the one standard that has the greatest flexibility as currently written, is with that acknowledgement of facilities space.
Right. Student representative.
Hi, thank you guys so much for coming and talking to us about this. My questions are similar to Representative Henderson's actually. First, I know the health standards are separate, but is there like a plan to adopt the proposed 2020, like the revised ones that Shape had, or is that like?
I'm happy to answer that. Currently, we are focused on moving the PE standards forward. PE and health education are two separate subject areas, have two different types of educators. And so for our schools to be prepared to implement these well, we felt really focusing on one set of standards at a time would be best received by our schools. But we do look forward to, at a later date, revisiting our education standards.
That makes sense. My second question is about the like standard for like the affective standards. In the like 9 to 12 band, it says that like students should be like selecting and participating in activities that like they find personally meaningful. And I see that the ones listed are like dance, yoga, and aerobics, which I know like on an equity standpoint, not many schools offer those in particular. And I wanted to know how schools are expected to like enforce and like adopt these standards. Or even to see like what like how would they see like what students find personally meaningful? Is that just based on what the school offers?
Pretty good question.
We love our students here.
They know.
They do. So, and I think that that's part of, having like the grade span learning and the physical educators really working with their students, what those examples and the standards are just examples. So the, really, I think the great part about, these standards too, like some of the shift is giving those PE teachers that flexibility to really understand their students and then supporting them in, building the skills and in the areas that, they want to develop a physical activity and movement.
To tap onto that, reiterate the difference between sort of standards and then sort of curriculum and
Yeah.
lesson planning, and so the standard provides the, the overarching goal, how it gets accomplished is really done at the LE and teacher.
Thank you. And we're really intentional in the standards about when we use IE versus EG. And so some of the indicators will list EG, meaning, for example, it can include dance aerobics. So there is latitude to select what that PE instructor really specializes in or has the curriculum and skill set to provide instruction around.
Thank you. Representative Boyd?
I want to thank all of you for the presentation on this. And Matt, I'm kind of approaching it from a slightly different angle in terms of, right now, we had a discussion about, parents about why are we requiring like basic financial literacy courses when we, some kids want to take AP economics, because there's only so much time. Like we have, varsity athletes, that, could really benefit from like having scheduled time, like lifting weights during the school year. Like, so rather than do kind of the soft stuff, is there a way to replace, like, or to fulfill this requirement through like really competitive varsity athletics? And then use the time during the school day to fit in like structured weightlifting and things like that really benefit our varsity athletes. Versus kind of this, I would say more soft stuff, but not really this type of stuff that really is going to create excellence for like our best athletes.
I'm sure we might want to push back a little bit on the idea that this doesn't create excellence, but I will say as to your specific question, that is actually a graduation requirements question as to whether there may be a substitution. And so I know that the board is going to put forward recommendations to ASBE as to how we might consider revising graduation requirements. And so if that is something that the board elects to put forward as part of the recommendations, we'd be happy to take a look at that.
Sounds good. With this though, so like does this create the flexibility to allow that substitution? Where let's say somebody's developing these types of skills in practice after school, but like they're on the football team. But the coach would really like them lifting during the day. You just don't have time after school to oftentimes get the required lifting in the practice. So like substitute rather than going to a gym class and learning all these same things that you fine-tuned years ago in practice with your team. Like, it just seems like it would be better to, create a path to satisfy without kind of all this other stuff, but.
I hear that as a substitution recommendation that
I'm gonna
happy
make a
to
note of it.
take on in the graduation.
Okay.
Good job. Pretty strict there. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all so much. Just the question one and the question maybe 1A, depending on your answer. I'm on the website of SHAPE and I'm looking at the adapted physical education national standards. Are we including that, is that gonna be like included in here? Is that gonna be like part of it, or is that something we do separately?
The. Oh, sorry. So for, as part of the National Task Force, they had, educators who are, experts in adaptive PE. So there is this content takes that into consideration. We have not previously, correct me if I'm wrong, separately adopted the national, adapted PE standards, and I actually do believe last time I checked, those are currently under revision right now, so their last set of standards are under revision. But as part of our implementation supports and professional development, that is something we are looking into to make sure our schools are getting the right guidance on how to provide adapted PE to our students.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that that's included in here, like when we vote on them, to make sure that like. Whether, again. We're not asking everyone to be an expert, but at least have the guidance and some of the skills to be able to serve all of our students. So just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Williams.
Yes, thanks. So thank you all for the presentation. At the beginning, we've got kind of touched on the rationale, but I'm trying to get a clear understanding in case I get questions. Why are we revising these standards now? What would you say to that?
I would say, we last revised these in 2017. Prior to that, it was 2007. So we are coming up the 9 to 10 year mark that we have sort of set a precedence for. And I think that it is just good practice to go back to some of these authoring agencies to find out what the current national standards are that are based on the latest research and literature around what these core subject areas are meant to promote. And so in the past 10 years, there's been philosophical development around the need to focus on physical literacy during more of the social emotional learning. And so this is moving in that same national direction. And we also know that over time, fidelity can wane in these areas. So this provides us a really great opportunity as a city to refocus on what our curriculum looks like in schools by just making sure we're all aligned on the same page with what a high quality physical education class looks like, and we'll be pouring in the implementation supports so that schools are ready. So it's a nice way to just sort of refresh what we're doing in this core subject area.
Thanks. I have one more question. Just like given that and like how things have changed over the last decade. I know we're still at the beginning of the process before like broader public input and comment. Do you like, are there any changes to curriculum or like the student experience that you already anticipate might change from like the 2017 standards to like the current standards?
Yeah, I think for a lot of our students and even many of us in this room, we have split opinions on our physical education class experience. Some of us loved it because we were athletic and competitive and sports oriented, whereas we have other students who have anxiety and want to avoid that subject area. And so this provides an opportunity for our PE classes to be a lot more student-centered in focusing on the athletic pursuits that speak to that student so that they can develop habits along the lifespan that will promote their health and well-being. They'll have a more positive association with school, they'll have a more positive association with that PE teacher, a more positive association with that class through a more student-centered approach. So we just think from individual student outcomes all the way up to the school climate and potentially attendance perspective, that we would see a net positive through this sort of course, this whole like philosophical change.
Thank you.
Right, I want to give the opportunity to Representative Chan, if he had a question. I don't know if he indicated that he had a question on that. No? Okay, then I will go back to Representative Willett.
And I will commit to looking side by side at the old standard versus the new standard, but I think that is a fair question, is why are we updating this now? Because, I mean, just to me, like having fitness is one of the benchmarks, seems very important, because part of building kids' confidence is actual results, not just like. Kind of like feeling good, like, can they actually, are they healthy, can they perform? And I want to make sure we're not revising this just for the sake of revising, that we actually think the new standards are better than the old standards, and I'm not suggesting they're not, but I think. You know, generally, kids, I think you can teach them how to be physically fit and everything like that, but if they actually are, because they have those skills and they develop those skills, then that's the number one thing, because then. And I'm worried we're just revising for the sake of revising, so I'll read it through and I'll compare side by side.
That's great feedback. We appreciate it. I think really what grounds this is that, you know, if we want health behavior change among students who may not be practicing physical activity behaviors, healthy behaviors, how does health education provide the cornerstones of their own self-efficacy to pursue their fitness that we want them to have? That these 4 domains, cognitive, social, affective, psychomotor, all of those go into a student's decision making to then be physically fit and make that a part of a sustainable lifestyle.
There are other questions? You've had like a round. Okay, thank you so much. Go right ahead.
Thank you guys for coming and presenting your proposed revision process. I actually like a lot of these, but I do have a question, and it's kind of more of a general question. But on slide 13, on the 6th through 8th grade span indicator, for example, it says that students understand and accept others' differences during a variety of physical activities. I like the broader, more subjective indicators like that, but I do also know that in upper grades, typically kids receive numbered or, you know, letter grades based on the assessment of how well they adhere to the activities and met the indicators. Will we be leaving it up to LEAs on how their teachers are supposed to assess and grade students based on these indicators and how they meet them? Will we be providing guidance on what you're looking for, you know, accepting others' differences? Like, are you going to tell them what kind of behaviors to look for in students, or like how to tell when a student has met that indicator?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. It's a great question. So they want, especially for the standard 3 for our social, and then also standard for the affective, those have really great and close alignment with the SEL competency areas and SEL standards. So I think one way we'll make sure to support our PE educators is in helping doing some alignment in that space. And then, but then also to be perfectly honest, some of our PE educators are already some of the probably your best skilled teachers for doing SEL in the schools, and you have kids doing like competition, competitive activities, so things they're already sort of really natural at managing. But to your other point though too around assessments, yes, that is one of the areas that we will be looking to provide some really key guidance for our teachers on around what does a quality assessment look like for these standards. How do you break the standard down into a progression that then you can assess in your process. So that is definitely one of the implementation
But again,
areas we will support.
assessment itself and curricular decisions are always
Yes.
made down at the LEA level. We can provide input to try to support it, but don't sort of dictate what that is.
Okay, thank you.
That everything? Okay. Representative Johnson Law, then we'll go to Thompson.
One more question, and I'm going to piggyback off of Representative Henderson as we're looking at the grad requirements. Under the practical studies diploma that you all have recommended, which is not a standard diploma, but you all have changed the health education requirement under 8.5, and then physical education 1. So how would these standards apply to an alternate diploma that's not a standard diploma?
Yeah, so it's the same as or any other set of standards. And so that is something that has changed, not just on the practical studies on the side, but on the post-graduation side as well. And so again, we look forward to getting any feedback that you all have for those graduation requirements.
Thank you.
And I just want to say from that one group is that these standards don't necessarily equal credits. I know that there was something on the agenda, Representative Johnson Law mentioned, there's not like a one-to-one translation. And so how LEAs implement them could be drastically different. Just because you have some schools that don't have any like varsity sports, like football and banter, but other schools may. And so for the standards themselves don't dictate the classes that are offered at schools to meet the various graduation requirements. They just set the guidelines of what must be achieved by the LEA. Getting adherence to those things. So that they don't select the courses, they don't identify courses, they don't identify curriculum. The standards don't do any of that. They just lay out, this is whatever the curriculum of your LEA, whether you're a DCPS or a charter LEA, by the time of go from K-12, depending on what your grades are at your school. These are the ultimate goals of what students must learn, but it doesn't, they could have 12 courses that align to this, they could have 3 courses. The standards do not dictate any portion of that. That is up to the individual LEA.
So what you're saying is you could have a great coach. Sorry, can I ask?
Yeah, you can.
So you could have, you could have a coach that could check off these things, and that LEA said, you know, we're gonna allow, like, let's say the football coach to determine these standards of met.
Well, it should be
star athlete.
That would be up to the LEA, so it probably would be left up to the football coach individually,
But
but
the school could say.
yeah, to the school or the LEA. So
Make them do the same.
DCPS could make a decision for all of DCPS schools versus KIP could make a decision for all of the KIP schools, but if there's only one. Like LEA, then that LEA and that charter board would make that decision for the school. Yeah, so it's not uniform, it's not. They will say, well, to meet the standard, it has to offer 5 different P classes. That is not what it's saying. So it could just be interpreted in multiple different ways by different LEAs.
Representative Thompson, I believe.
And I'm sorry, 3 things. The first question was a competency. So, yes, we have learned or have been reminded that we already knew that LEA can offer waivers of competency, but LEA can also make decisions about course requirements. With you are asking as far as a varsity athlete, it's up to the LEA if they would request a competency-based waiver for student schools, but something the student does outside of the course, like are there other ways for folks to demonstrate competency. That is something that is already within the regulations that OSCE provides, and so that's not a new, that we don't have to request a change of anything like that as far as the graduation requirements, but it is very rarely utilized. Why it's very rarely utilized, I don't have a great answer to that. Maybe that's something we want to learn more about, but it is an existing rule. So that's my comment. My question first, so we, I guess it was 2023, did some work and published a report as part of the NASB Healthy Facilities Network. And going back to the question around swimming, and not specifically to swimming, are there other places in the physical activity standards where it might behoove us to talk with like the DME or others as far as what is provided as far as school grounds, so that folks can really access the standards? Because one of the things we looked at is that DCPS does have pretty much like a formula for what they say every school must have at different grade bands, but charters do not. And where we do see depending on when the school has been modernized or built, there may be places within DCPS where there might be challenges and differences in the grounds or the facility. And then B, as we update the standards, are there other places outside of swimming where we would look to say, you know what, the space available might present challenges in folks being able to access, and I've heard you talk about encouraging schools to, you know, make relationships with DPR and that type of thing, which I don't discourage. That is how we did PE when I was in school. I went to a charter school. I can tell you all the things that come with that. But outside of saying to schools like, step outside of the place that you have, are we flagging proactively and communicating with our other agency partners to say, hey, this is something we might want to address at a city level?
So happy to report that there are no other indicators that we feel like run up against a facilities issue like the swimming one. Everything else we believe can be accomplished on the school grounds. And so we are regularly looking for opportunities to bring in citywide partners. Something that we promoted recently among our charter LEAs was that DDOT has a bicycle education and bicycle safety program, which they bring on site to schools. And so that's just one example of how we coordinate among our district government partners and the schools and LEAs to be able to provide some of these experiences on site when they may not otherwise be able to do so.
My third question, and I would imagine, I would hope, all right, back up. When we have the public feedback, I think one of the things that I hope we ask of the educators and others is like, what is your experience and what are you running up against? With some of these things, like I know in my high school experience alone, we were on maybe 3 different campuses, all varying types of facilities. So had the experience of being bused to a rec center or Boys and Girls Club tuition, or being bused and partnering with a university to do it, but that also comes with cost. Whether it's time or whatever it is, but that's the thing. And so I guess if we ask them engagement sessions and not just assume based on what we see on paper. I would, and my third thing is back to the SBO standard. So I really appreciate that you all have flagged within these standards where we can begin to implement the SBO standards. Given we are not addressing health standards yet, are there other places where we might see integration with SEL, especially as we're making the changes to the graduation requirements? Because I know they are a set of standards we didn't have before. And we do, and it very much aligns with the graduate profile that obviously put a lot of work into, but trying to figure out how to map when students are actually receiving that instruction and where it overlaps with other content areas like health, PE, social studies, or
I don't want to speak for our Division of Teaching and Learning Friends who oversee the SEL standards. But I'm sure if they were here, they would relay the fact that SEL standards can show up in every content area and in the non-instructional portions of the school day as well. And so I know they are committed to implementation tools and resources for how that shows up in every part of the school day. So definitely room for in all course areas.
I'll also just say, I know when we were doing the social studies standards revision and the SEL standard revision, we look to try to align language to the digital literacy side of things. And so as we continue to update future standards, again, keeping the alignment in mind is I think
Thank you. Something. Dr. Olson.
Thank you for the presentation. DME put out a report, I think last year, that constantly resonates with me. And it talked about the employment wage gap between DC natives and residents who make DC their home. And there's about a $30,000 wage gap for young residents between the ages of 18 to 24. With that said, I'm always thinking about our evolving ecosystem and what opportunities we could create for our students. And I'm always plugging that we are the sports capital with every opportunity that I get. I think this is the opportunity where it really makes sense. The alignment is clear. So when I attended the NASB conference over the summer, they were reaching out to their other stakeholders in the city, asking them about graduation requirements and standards and getting input from their employers there in the city or employees. I'm just wondering, I know that you took this from Shape, but I think, and I guess this is more of a comment than a question, I think this will be a big opportunity for us to reach out to some of our other franchises here in the city. I think whatever opportunity students can get to get in and get a head start compared to some other people who will move here and make DC their home, I think we should do that. So if I'm a graduate of whatever school here in DC, and I know that my standards were helped shaped by the Commanders or the Wizards or the Capitals, I think that's something that will open doors and start a conversation to get to that ultimate goal of making sure that our students have the opportunity to have family sustaining career experiences.
Appreciate the comment. I also say I was on a call with the Nats earlier this week, so always looking to plug in.
Wonderful, thank you.
Seeing if everybody has exhausted their questions for this topic or opting. I think so. I want to thank you guys for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have an option now to have a break and I'm going to take it. But we're moving to doing pretty well, but take out to take a 5-minute break. I here's exactly 6:16. I was hoping everybody will be back at 6:21. 5 minutes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, you're good.
Okay. All right, we're coming back from our break. The next item on our agenda is a debrief of the January public meeting panel, which is on the topic of effective community school model. This is our time to debrief, discuss, and decide on any concrete next steps. Members, you have in your materials a summary document with key highlights from the panel. Are there any action steps we want to talk about as a board based on the panel discussion? Floor is open. Oh, no more second. I'm not seeing a lot of discussion. Representative Williams, thank you, sir.
Good service level. Yeah, I mean, I think, I left with kind of more questions than answers, but also with like stronger confidence that we need to be strategic for how we grow with this in our city. And I'm just posing the broader question to everyone as to kind of like what action steps we see. Like as we approach budget season with regards to community schools. Most of my questions, like on the dais, were around just kind of like getting some of the data around how to, it's worthwhile to fund. But I also understand how it could be seen as a challenge to fund in a budget year. So that's more thoughts than like direct ask, but that's where I'm starting on.
Other comments or questions? Representative Johnson Law.
Just two, because I know like, one is a clarifying one. I know we voted on this, right, for like our budget letter to make sure to fund community schools. Okay, so yes, thank you. And then the second one is, as I go around to my Ward 8 schools and I talk to them about funding these types of things, again, sometimes it seems like folks don't have the funds to do this. And when I think about community, some of these things people don't need money to do. Some of them they can just do. And so I'm wondering, how do we use our pulpit to be able to like be like a community hub per se, to bring folks together to be able to implement maybe some of these things, whether it's a nonprofit, like whether it's a church. I'm always saying, don't judge me, y'all, but like it's like 5,000 churches, it's 5,000 nonprofits, but I have 52 schools. It's 5,000 y'all, but I have 52 schools. Please adopt one. And not all of you, and I love, y'all know I love Anacostia and Blue, but everybody can't adopt Anacostia and Blue. There's 52 schools, both public and public charter, that really need assistance, and some of that community modeling could really be in what they mentioned in this panel could really be used if we just figure out how to maybe do some of this community stuff ourselves if we can't fund it. So it's just a thought, but I don't know how that would work. I don't know how we would use this pulpit to do that all the time. So it's just something for us to think about as we're thinking about community schools that look like the city.
Thank you. Representative Johnson, we want a debrief on community schools. Just wanted to ask if you have any thoughts or feedback on during this debrief.
My question to you all would be, what would you like for President Patterson and I to take to the strategic planning session? There is a strategic planning session for DC community school that involves obviously DCPS, external facilitators, community partners. That means the hands elected if you allow this, but if we're participating in this brand new session, what do you want that? And how does it, what message do you want us to carry on your behalf?
I think for me, one thing would be to support the capacity building of individual schools and figuring out what the best ways and strategies to do that. I know that within DCPS, some of the cost of funding an individual position have shifted from central to individual schools, and that makes it harder for schools to kind of be willing to staff that. So I think the degree to which we can be transparent about like allocating that money from central office and then supporting more schools with partnerships would be something that I would want to figure out how we can collaborate around.
Thank you. Good thoughts. Linda Johnson.
I think maybe going back to what I said earlier, like maybe that's a good place to brainstorm about, okay, if the budget is tight, how can we implement some of this stuff between schools and community partners without maybe stretching the budget if they're already doing community work? Just, I don't know what happened in Congress today, and so I don't know if the budget, did they vote? I don't know if the budget has been slashed or not, but I'm just thinking about if everyone's gonna say it's a tight year and we can't expand the funding for like technical community schools, then how are ways that how can we think about ways to figure this out that may require a budget line item?
That is a very good question. I think it also sensitive. So central office itself only was able to fund community schools because they got full service community school grants from the federal government. The federal government has stopped funding community schools, full service community school grants. So it's not like they had local funds to do this work. They had set up a model that had been awarded millions of dollars from the federal government to do full service community schools, and that's how they're looking to fund the coordinator. So I think the law took those federal funds because the federal government has decided to no longer fund that by grants.
Director, was that the ESSER money or was that something separate?
No, yeah, it was not ESSER money.
This was
Community schools have been around long before ESSER, and they were a separate pot of money they had dedicated just for full service community schools.
Got it, okay. I wasn't sure if they, combined the pot.
No, because, DCPS got their first round of full service funding back in 18.
Okay, got it.
Like, before the pandemic, before ESSER.
Got it.
Maybe it was.
Yeah, but using the example that you just brought back up about the ESSER funding, because that was my question. We had the panels, how they moved away from, they started with ESSER funding, but then they created a different way after the ESSER funding went away.
Community schools never, is it
No,
all
but
pot of
I'm
money?
talking about the particular system, they kind of like had money, they were using ESSER money, what the kind of stated.
DC, we should say.
No, not DC. DC, one of the panelists, it's not Baltimore, but one of the other panelists said that they had started.
I know what you're talking about. She did.
Oh, it's
Is that-
Boston.
Yeah, in Boston. And my question to them at that particular time, once ESSER funding went away, how did you shift and
Right.
what routes did you use or what creativity did you use in losing that funding, which was federal funding,
Right.
moving to local funds, both, and I was trying to figure out. So to your question, that's what I'm
Model,
thinking about, is what
model.
you lose federal funding, whether we call it, federal funding for particularly or ESSER funding, what are some of the models that we look at? Locally or like.
Places like that, they will stay up. Yeah. Maryland funds community schools, they have bills that are passed in their legislature, and they funded they fund students. It's a funding formula in the state.
Maryland literally passed 1,000, I believe, lady stated, 600 in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Alone.
They adopted it as a state strategy. They said they have an office in the SCA dedicated. Wow.
Which I believe helps with their crime and everything else very well. So, the decrease in their crime and a lot of other activities that they've seen, that they do it at that level. Representative Goulet.
Well, I just wanted, I guess, to chime in on this. I was impressed with the panel. I learned a lot more about community schools through this, and I really see the value in it, because I think, the role they can serve is almost like a case manager. And with the challenges we're seeing with chronic absence, case and truancy, if you have somebody who can help families through the process, who can help, it really can make a big difference. So I think the key that I came away with is there's a lot of upside potential for this program, but a lot of it depends on who you get in the role, and then the coordination with the principals. If you have an administration of the school that is really excited about this, willing to embrace it, and then work in partnership, it's gonna be really successful and improve outcomes. If you don't, then there might be just friction created there. So I'm interested in continuing to pursue it. I'm glad we put it in the budget letters and asked. I thought it was a valuable discussion, but I think we gotta make sure it doesn't turn into just another layer of the schools and it keeps moving outcomes forward with control. So I'm cautiously optimistic. So.
And I appreciate, you know, say this again, I said it, about me, Dr. O'Stephen, that he's working with community schools and actually in our budget letter, spelling out how we would like to do that, being very specific about it, by details. I had to give him his props for that, instead of just saying we want to prioritize community schools, but actually how we want to do them and building that capacity. So, is there any other discussion, of community schools, Steve Reed?
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. So the meeting, what is the meeting? What is the purpose?
No, it was shared in the leadership reports that President Patterson and I were invited to a DC, but it's in the leadership. Oh, it's the overflow. It says that, President Patterson and I accept the invitation to join strategic planning meeting DC by the Coalition for School and IEL at American University. Presenting inviting us to join that.
But like,
And I was asking if there's something that you all wanted us to convey in that meeting, but I have to stay for. That was my question for you, that is, if you bring the panel.
but like the purpose of the meeting is, I know who's convening it, but like, what is the?
It says strategic fit. The strategic planning committee with DC Community School.
That's all y'all know.
Yes,
No, like guiding question, I got, yeah.
no, they're gonna share an agenda, but like all the, like, DCPS staff is there, OSCE staff is there, our community school, nation's capital is there. Other community people are there, Learning Policy Institute is there, coalition programs there. Ruben, Dr. Jacobson, who testified at the council, he's posted it on the site at American University, where they have space. But that is the purpose, is to bring these pricing as discussed, like what they're planning around what this looks like, is there an advocacy strategy or not? What are people's vision for it is, because one thing is like, well, they're varying the depths and levels of understanding. One of the things they made very clear in the email invitation, that what this is not is a recreation of the OSCE Community School Advisory Committee that oversees their grant program. That it is not that, Delia will be there, so we'll call it like DCPS. So they're looking, because the role of the coalition, what they do is they plan this out from the state level. Like at the highest level, like the strategy to implement and fund it. So they invited us to join that conversation. They didn't ask, like they had already, all the people were already on the list. I don't know who they invited, because some of the other community partners that are there. But I think have expressed interest in some way, shape, or form. So. But I did.
Representative.
I would like to see us, a continuation of care, if you will. So when I think about my introduction to community school, it was with, Noel and Ward 7. And so I was there from the time that I received students in first grade through their graduation in 5th grade. And so they had wraparound services there through a partnership with CCF. And you can tell by building those relationships with those students and their families, what their need is going to be and what their trajectory can look like if they don't get it. Some of those students that I had in that cohort, I called up with when I was at the, and I could tell that they did not receive the same care So it kind of goes back to the early warning signs proposal that I had. If we're investing in our students at these stages, various stages, it's very important that we can continue the way that we don't drop the baby in transition. So I don't know how that can look. I don't know if that means going back to the churches of which we have 50,000 here at DCF Booker and our Greek and all of our other organizations to pick up this work, because what I don't want to happen on behalf of the people who are school-based is that this becomes another task for school leadership and school personnel to do. But there's enough people in the city, so enough nonprofits for us to figure this out. But it's very important that we don't lose the care and the continuity that we build for children and families who make transitions to different schools. We have to keep that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, are there any other discussion points, Representative Henderson?
Yeah, one last thing, just from a macro perspective, it worries me that, as a city, if we're meeting kids' needs at schools, we're selecting certain schools, and it's not necessarily aligning with all the schools that are serving kids who have those needs. There's just potential for misalignment and for, as Dr. Colson said, like putting it on the school to be yet more things for students and families. And I don't know, you don't want to not advocate for community schools and the resources that we can get at these schools, but really meeting those needs at the individual family level is more desirable in my opinion, but that's just a tension that I guess you'll have to encounter when strategizing. Like, just keep in mind that if we're meeting needs through a select number of schools, we're leaving people out.
That's exactly the type of things that we want here to try to bring up during that meeting. Representative Williams?
Yeah, I understand that tension, and I mean, we've heard Representative Chang also ask us countless times, like the metaphor of like having something on our plate and taking something off our plates, right? And that's why I do think that the solution for the schools that have a community schools model is to have a funded position for it, so that it's not another administrator, or another teacher, or another grade lead who is then expanding what is already on a very full plate, but someone who is really able to manage partnerships, assess needs, communicate with families, like do the job of being the glue for the community, that needs an actual full position rather than just putting another serious responsibility on someone's already full-time job.
So at that point, it is not. There is no community school thing, it doesn't have a community school manager, that is not a school administrator or school staff person. That's not how it's supposed to be a separate, and if it's not a separate position, then it would not qualify, like, but they're still.
Funding those positions, and that's why with my original ask around, hey, don't just like make this work with the money we're already giving you, and to draw this, but like actually give us the money to fund a full position so that we can continue the programming and services that we've been providing.
And I think too, what also has to be. Yes, and I also think there has to be an understanding that in community schools work with fidelity. There is an overarching, like, entity that coordinates all of that, that makes sure all of your community school managers are trained. They have the same national training, the same national certification. These aren't just, it shouldn't be very different. Obviously, different neighborhoods have different needs. So a Ward 1 school is not gonna maybe have the same needs as a Ward 5 school. So the partnership will look different, the needs will look different. But the people who are in those roles, when it's done to fidelity, like Baltimore trains all of their community school coordinators together. In the summer, they get the same training. So that when they go back to whatever their school is, in their community, and they're equipped with the same skills and the know-how, and they can like use the same set of tools and resources, and also like, when you have it for people, and they can do peer learning and all that kind of stuff. But then they can also talk across, the kids go from one school to another school, or community to another community, because there's a relationship between the coordinators across the school. in that community. So it's a help for that too, but I think it all has, but the point is there's usually a centralized vision for the work that blankets a community or school district. When it's done just individual school by individual school, you miss the economies of scale that you get around data sharing, around family, community engagement and partnerships. And I think that's one of the things that it's gonna be interesting about the conversation that we'll have. Because what we're not talking about is like what we want our city to do with their grant funds. It's like, is there an overarching strategy that should be presented to the council on how to fund this as a city? Because in most places, the city is a partner for community schools. They aren't like a separate entity that exists within it. So our community school could be coordinated with the Department of Health, like they are partners, just like other entities in the community.
But I think for me, that's why I was asking the question I asked, is like, what is the, the strategic plan? And it sounds like you're saying that it is a strategic plan to talk about how, like, how the city should be approaching. Is that, or are you assuming, because I mean, we could have a strategic planning meeting about.
Well, I do know there are also people from the
client
council
or
there,
advocacy
council staff
or-
that are there.
Yeah. Like, cause I was like, I don't know what to tell you, take back, cause I didn't know, I was like, is it funding, is it advocacy, are we decided on the one model, cause there are different models, like. Less about like the attendance list, I mean, and I guess that's a little bit helpful, but it still could be all of those things, get the other people.
I was telling you that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Representative Chang?
I think I'm on the same page as most of you, and I think we actually all agree about the what, which is that we want to be bringing what community schools offer in terms of coordination, navigation, support, right, into our schools and for all of our families. The piece that I'm wrestling with right now as we're having this conversation is you all know that I work in healthcare. We're gonna lose $1 trillion in funding with a T over the next 10 years. There's no individual state, city, or organization that's going to be able to replace that. So, in part, what I'm thinking is, you know, the needs of our families are going to be extraordinarily high in the next several years as an example, right, comes down the pike. And I think the question for us is the extent to which and how schools step in and educators step in to help in the most effective way. I'm thinking about what LaJoy was saying earlier about the budget challenges, and part of you know part of the challenge and the opportunity of us having this constant conversation of, well, there's no money to add, is I think it really forces us to prioritize, right? Thinking through what it is that we need to help with first. And I don't have any offers or solutions here. I'm just naming how challenging this is and the ask, I think, is actually to think about this broader problem that we're trying to solve, right? That I think community schools and that model are a piece of it, but I would say zoomed out even further, it's something that, I love the idea of a navigator in the schools, Ben, right? And in the same way that I love the idea of having a school librarian in every school, I am afraid that by thinking about it through inputs that way, um, we may not be zoomed out enough to think about the scale of the problem that's about to affect our families, and how much support they're going to need to get through the federal policy changes. And then the role that, you know, we can play to, I don't even know what the verb is, right? It's not even plug a hole. But what is the most strategic way that we can actually help, right? I think is actually the problem and the challenge that I feel like we need to be wrestling with. And and I don't know what that solution is. But my fear is that even if we do have a CHW or an MSW in every school, there's no way, right, that that's gonna address all the problems that are coming down the pike.
Thank you, sir. Were there any other discussions? Right. All right, thank you guys. My discussion again, I think for us, is that action step is to it's another. The being together and they can bring back some type of answer total for all the things that were brought up with us. So we will now move our public meet and discussion. At last month's working session, we voted on balancing the record for March. We now discussed April. So do we have any suggestions for April items, taking it down at this current time? Representative Johnson Law, then I'll go to Representative Henderson.
I'm going up the thingy. I put it in the. I put it in the chart. I was thinking about either, since we're talking about PE, I know Representative Thompson mentioned this some months ago about getting a panelist on that. So I was thinking like a panel that we could make up of like the physical education experts, since we're bringing those up. And I had another idea about, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I'm happy other people have brought this up. I really wish that we had a parallel system with digital learning. Or like a hybrid system, you know, with in-person and digital learning, because like with these last, kind of like towards like the middle/end of COVID, where it was kind of like half in, half out. But to have like a parallel system towards like, if you need to go to virtual, you won't miss out on learning. And so I don't know if the panel is like digital learning, and as a city, right, as a government, like how do we run that parallel? Because I feel like with this snowstorm, we could have just hit the switch. You know what I mean? And then that way people wouldn't have to worry about like slipping and falling. Like these last 2 weeks, like this weekend, we could let the city, you know, DPW, y'all do what y'all do. But the kids are still learning, because some schools were like, well, the kids are losing out on learning, the kids are losing out on learning. And I'm like, I understand, but many children can't get to you. So how are they going to learn if they can't get to you? So I need you to take off your learning hat and put on your humanity hat. I understand you have learning numbers and all the things. I get it. But it just frustrated me that people were trying to decide between my learning numbers and the well-being of families. Because I do feel like the well-being of families, in my book, Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes first. And safety is a part of that, and many of them couldn't do that. And so it's got me thinking, like, why did we? And I asked the question and nobody could answer me, like, why are we taking all this away? And so I'm just wondering, is there a way for us to have a type of hybrid system? And I don't know what that panel would look like. It's just an idea. I don't know if it's like we have some digital learning standards. I don't know where folks could have, where they put on, you know, they flip on the switch or something like that. I'm not sure what that would look like or what that would entail, because a lot of those things were done away. I know GCPS, something with the technology. I know there's some concerns there, but just trying to think through things, because we're in unprecedented times, and because we're in unprecedented times, I feel like we should prepare more. Because like, what if there is another pandemic and people think, oh, that can't happen? Well, it did happen, and there's a lot of things happening in the country, and Alistair just said there's gonna be $1 trillion like gone in healthcare over the last 10 years. And so a lot of unprecedented things are happening. And so why do we always have to be on the defense? Why can't we be on offense? It's just an idea. Throw it
So I'm
away.
hearing it's two.
It's two.
Yeah, because I'm hearing a panel on physical education and or come back to you. Sorry. Okay.
I just have a quick comment about the physical education. We were planning one for February of 2025. We had some panelists lined up, but then you all decided to not do that one because we paused on that work.
Right.
So if we were to do that one, maybe.
It's now time to again, since they picked up the work.
We even have someone from Shape America lined up, so we could maybe get to it again.
So, very timely.
Very timely. There we
They
go.
picked up the work, you're making a suggestion, so, okay.
Alignment.
Noted, Representative Hens.
Yes, so this is a bump from our discussion last month, but the proposal is a panel that aligns with the task force, right, proposed task force, coming to a point of offering its own recommendations and then having a panel that can speak to those recommendations.
Others? We have three now. Voting for April. Any other? So what we'll do, I think Representative Johnson, while you've spoken to digital learning somewhat,
Mhm.
go back to the panel on physical education, which our deputy director also spoke a little bit about that. But did you want to elaborate on that any more, physical education?
I was hoping we could get someone who maybe understands the adaptive, physical education national standards to maybe like include them on the panel. As again, I'm just thinking as we begin this work, I know this was mentioned before and we held it because it wasn't quite there yet. And so as we're bringing it back up again, I was just hoping we could like put this at the top of mind, but also I'm not wedded to either. And I can combine these two just to make the time go faster. I'm not wedded to either of these two ideas. It was just thinking about the flow of the board and what we're doing. And also if something is more, like I'm thinking about the grad requirements, like in the things that we're doing and trying to get this across the finish line. If it's like, okay, let's do this in May, or we do like the digital learning one and like we do it in June or something like that, like I'm totally okay with that. I'm just trying to think of ways to move the work forward.
All right.
Yes. I mean, I was looking at the timeline that I presented. I feel like they,
Which one, for PE or for the grad one?
but they only gave us one for today.
Oh, okay.
They're pretty. Might be more helpful to do today, panel, after they present to us in May. If they're coming back to us with the draft standards, that they incorporate all of their public feedback. And they're gonna present a set of standards that are draft for the board to do whatever their process is. Their process is, so that if they present that at the May working session, having a May panel later on that month might be more closely tied to. And then give that June, July timeframe, whatever added to feedback the board is gonna give. That just might be a better timeframe for that one versus April. But they'll have a new set that's gonna be more up to date than.
I appreciate that. I love these discussions because that allows us to start looking at the time. The time is of the essence. That's why going back to Representative Henderson that I'm now looking at. That's what you guys are doing in the timeliness of it.
Yeah.
I'm moving toward task force recommendation.
Yeah.
As the April.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more discussion on it, but that's where I'm leaning, because of the timeline that we have.
I agree, and if that's amenable to.
I would say that's amenable to me, so President Patterson, can we do Director Butler's suggestion? Well, I know we have to vote on it, but it would be, I would like, if the board could vote on doing the PE one in May, and then when we come back to the other working sessions, I'll keep the digital learning one as maybe like a June or something of that. But again, if that's amenable to Because I know the grad test, that is on a much faster timeline than
So I take that suggestion, I agree with that suggestion,
Okay.
I think we're gonna do that, we'll kind of put that in the tracker, so to speak, so that we understand that coming back next month, that's one for month, that's in the tracker, that was suggested each month, even though I'm holding on it, but it's in the tracker to bring out next month.
I will say, y'all can vote on May. You all have the future to make that decision. Like, you don't have to wait till March. It just gives us a longer runway.
When we do 2 months, then we start doing 2 months, and now we're doing 1 month. I'm not opposed to doing 2 at a time,
It's whatever you all feel comfortable.
you know, and there, you know, the suggestion of our director. So I'm not opposed to that, so I'll take some responsibility and first we'll go on April. I think first and foremost, so April, what we have is a panel, basically, we talking about the graduation dashboard, requirements, for the month of April. Looking around at everybody, all in favor? Aye. Any nays, abstentions? So we have our April. Now, since the very good suggestion was made and it's been discussed, I think we should go ahead and try to make sure to lock in for May, the panel on physical education, because it gets with the time. Would love to get a discussion on that. If anyone.
No, I'm supportive of it. I just. After hearing that presentation today, I just don't know why we're doing this. I don't know why we're not raising the health standards, not just taking both at the same time. Or not that the health standards come out, the health standards come out, but doing both the health simultaneously with the fitness. I know why we're waiting on the health standards, and I think that reason makes perfect sense. But like separately doing these fitness standards, when I'm not even sure, I'm gonna study enough that we're moving in the right direction on them, other than just that this governing body feels the need to reword things every few years. It just doesn't seem like something that's a priority, but if we are gonna do it, I support your idea for having a panel. The other thing that it's just on the horizon for me that's a bit of a concern is what's going on with the federal issues right now, whether or not, you know, this year's budget's gonna be reopened at all from that. I mean, the fundamental problem is now in the middle of our fiscal year, you know, this bill is being overturned. So you have 2 problems occur. One is your cash flow. If we rely on cash that we get in March and April, so we're almost out of cash. So the fund balance usually takes us to March, when we get the first half property taxes. And in April, when we start getting the income tax returns. But everything you get in April could now be thrown off, and you might not get that in September. Cause like, we have like, it's close to 18,000 returns that may have to be redone. So like, all that money flowing into the city may not be there. I don't know whether we'll have to go back to borrowing or have to do cuts for this current year. I mean, that's a state of real concern. And then I can't say with certainty, but I would think they'd be pushing the budget process up. So I just think, I think at some point we may need to address that for some sort of public panel on like the budget issues that may spill over to our schools. However, you know, I guess we wait on that. So I'm gonna support that. It just fits in the back of my mind. It's like a bigger problem that's coming up. If we might need to have like an urgent public discussion, but that would probably be in June. So let's just do everything for May and then come back in June.
I love you, Representative Poulet. You sounded like how I did a year ago about cell phones.
Yes. And that worked out.
It did.
And I do think they allow for, appreciate their representative, like, just walking into it. I know there's a lot of possibilities that can happen. With all the things that are going on with Congress and how Congress continues to just mess up our lives, particularly around budgets. It's the same time last year, you know, that they were messing with our budget again. So, but right now, what we have on the table
I have
is, yes.
I see sometimes movies or time frames. I had the same reaction to you talked about the scholastic side, even they probably said And so I do think they make sense based on their timeline. I would just ask us to hold, because sometimes they decide that they're gonna deliver us stuff later. And so I think we should make sure we keep that in the notes. We should possibly vote on it in May, possibly do it in May, assuming also keeps to their timeline.
So,
But I don't want us to have to like go, we're gonna upend it. Cause often changes the timeline. As far as the, Representative Kool-Aid talks about the budget stuff, I would remind members that, we do have vehicles that are not public entities to have conversations. And if there is a desire, to have a conversation about how the different, decisions being made federally impact our cash flow in our schools, we can have that. I'm not so sure it lends us up to a panic though. Especially with like timing and other things, but, happy to talk offline with you, about what other options could be. And then as far as the, reverse digital literacy, technically, I do feel like we're, I don't know what this. So first of all, we actually do have attendance standards within our program. We have already made changes to the attendance standards. The reason that the charters who decided they were going to be virtual last week were able to be virtual last week is because we already provided that. We made those provisions after the pandemic to get clarity on when it is allowable during weather incident to say we're going to do virtual. I say that to say, if the mayor chose, she could have opted for DCPS to have virtual learning all of last week. She could opt for DCPS to have virtual learning tomorrow. There's no new provision that's needed. Now, that's not to excuse or champion her decision one way or another, but I do think it's important for us to know what's already on the books. And when we actually need to put something new on the books in order for people to do certain things. And the truth is that tool is already there. Just like, snow plows were already a thing that existed that we chose to deploy later than we should have, for community sand and salt places probably would have been before it snowed, because they were out of sand and snow salt most like several days beforehand. And so I do want us to know that as a board, we have already made the right provision to allow the mayor to make the right call. And that's the call she made. But it's not because we didn't do our job, allowing for a mechanism to keep kids safe. And I think everybody should know that they don't have to create anything new. Literally, if the mayor made a decision right now, DCPS could be virtual, but it would require this planning. They would have had to say, hey, it's probably gonna be 20 degrees over the last 4 weeks. We know what the weather says. Teachers, kids, take y'all stuff home. We'll provide asynchronous days, do virtual learning, all the things, and they didn't do it. But the attendance policy does allow it because we made sure it did allow it.
Thank you, Representative Thompson. Representative Johnson Law.
Thank you, Representative Thompson. I hear you on the attendance piece, but I think we have to go deeper, and I think it's bigger than that. The snow day was an example. And again, we are in unprecedented times. And yes, it is going to require planning, but I really think we need to have more conversations about what is it going to look like for like a parallel, like hybrid system, to where even if somebody is enrolled, like at any school in this city, like would they be able to enter into some type of like online learning model, one, and then two, if everyone needs to, if you turn on the switch to ensure that we have an actual plan that actually puts it in place to make it work, not just for a day or two, but like if this is something, again, people thought COVID was crazy until it happened. And I know people think like, oh, like it's like crazy, like life and death situations, but the kids were in and out for what, 2.5, 3 years. And a lot of our kids, especially Black and brown, didn't recover. And a lot of them didn't even have the tools really necessary to be able to enter into online. And so I think I'm just asking you all to help. Can we think outside the box?
Maybe I should be clear. I'm not arguing for or against. I am saying that it is important for everybody to know that outside of the planning and other things, it's not that we can't. Because sometimes something is against the rules, sometimes it's against the policy, sometimes something is illegal, whatever it is. I am saying that the mayor made the call she made for other reasons, but it's not because she couldn't have had virtual learning. Because I'm saying that our job, when we did our job and OSSI did their job, and allowing a provision that would have made that possible. So I'm not arguing for or against the panel. I'm not trying to take away from any of the concerns you're raising. I just think it is really important for us to know in this room, and anyone who is listening to know in this room, what our current policies provide for.
So question to you then, when I brought this up with someone at DCPS and I said, if the mayor could do this, then like, why couldn't she? And they said, you don't even have the capacity to do that and we can't.
Capacity is not the same as policy. I don't work for DCPS or the mayor.
But maybe that's
Might not have the technology, they might not have the devices for each student who are, obviously, like my kid has a device, because she's 4.
Right.
But like, it could be other things in terms of capacity and not necessarily, they don't have the policy to show them what is available to them. They just might not have the money to deploy
It could be
it
a
citywide.
Okay, all right, I'm with you, okay.
So what I'm hearing as I'm here also discussing, at one point we were going to vote on May, but I'm hearing some hesitation in deciding tonight on May. I think that's what I'm hearing, and what it was going to be, it was going to be on physical education. There wasn't even a digital learning aspect, it's on physical education for May, based on the schedule that they gave us. But with some of the commentary that's been taking place, that has said, let's hold for a moment, because we don't actually know things can change and we don't want to lock something in, something change. So I'm going to take that suggestion, because we did not have to vote on May, it was just a suggestion. You know, that we were going to vote on 2 months at one time, because we voted, we've accomplished what we were meant to be, which was 8, got that accomplished. So that being said, I'm going to not vote on May at this particular time. We're gonna put it in the queue, I believe is what I said earlier. I think it's in there at this particular time, and I think we can, there's no further discussion, we can keep moving. Are we there? All right, thank you. All right. Committee reports, I believe is where we are at this particular time. Next on the agenda are the committee reports. I will call on each committee in alphabetical order, and each chair or co-chair will share out and answer any questions. Okay. So let's start with administrative. And this will be, I believe you do it, I think that was your last one, so you go right ahead, sir.
Yes, so we have the report in front of us. With regards to OMB, we went through the normal context of the cases that have been shared. You have those numbers in front of you. OSA has a couple other events coming up with regards to Student Fest that is just recently passed at the 26th of January, so it's just recently completed. And we talked about kind of the student safety conversations that will begin with regard to their office, and hearing more from other members of OSA with regards to that. There were some facilities updates with regards to our particular office updates. And then members did stay on after the meeting to discuss support for the Office of the Ombudsman and how we as a group can be able to support them at this point. Are there any questions?
Not a question, but I would note that student fest is not completed, it's actually postponed due to weather.
Thank you. Do we have another date?
I have not seen another date, but
Not yet.
they are rescheduling due to weather.
Any more questions before? Wait. I want to say thank you, for giving good advice for and everything, that had to be so the course of last year. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, President Bennett.
Next, we will have, college careers and like readiness, Representative Henderson and Representative Thompson, our co-chairs.
So we had Representative Goulet join us to discuss the issue around ELA curriculum and the inclusion of full-length novels. And so that was about a letter that Representative Goulet has drafted to go to DCPS that the committee is doing a few edits on to get that back to Representative Goulet. And then we talked about the March panel that will address this issue and discuss the composition of a panel that we envision to include a representative from the LSAT at Deal, which surfaced this issue to be a parent, a teacher who is implementing the curriculum that they're using at Deal, to invite someone from Aussie to talk about the wider status of ELA curricula in DC and how it aligns with standards and science of reading requirements, and also the possibility of a national expert to discuss how all those things are balanced in the ELA curriculum. And we discussed the artificial intelligence resolutions that are sitting with our committee. There are two. We are still working on a few edits to those resolutions, in particular to respond to the panel that we had, and also to consider intersections of the resolutions with proposed legislation. And we are hoping to bring that to a committee vote at our next meeting. And if we vote it out of committee, we'll bring it back to the full board at the following working session. We talked a bit about the February panel that's going to invite recent graduates and just kind of check in on the progress of that panel, filling out that panel, and also what questions we want to pose to them. And we talked about the next graduation department's task force meeting and how we plan to shift from our public engagement to coalescing around the recommendations that we're going to make as a task force. We'll come back to the board. We discussed the site visits that we've been talking about for some time now. We're having a feedback loop on the standards that we have passed in recent years, so that we can check in with school communities about how those are being implemented. And we are moving forward pursuing visits at Coolidge and River Terrace. So we're in the process of getting those together, and we've also invited, we have a running list of places that we would like to visit. Dr. Colson was not able to join us, so we will invite her again to the next meeting to talk about the issue that was referred to us around attendance. Okay. And that's it.
All right. Any questions for the committee?
And to all prepared for the school site visits, do you have a rubric or some sections related to the standards that you guys to ask for your information and is there something you need us to create?
Not yet, but we've been, first, in conversation with Haley, the tulip budget is actually, around high school graduation requirements, not favors, and the. I'm sorry, her name, you know, that's the Easter, no,
Eleni,
lady, Levy and, Issa, our student representative, are helping to coordinate that visit. We are doing that one first because, A, she asked us to come, which we love, and she's on the task force. B, we both have a student and a teacher perspective, and so we're gonna kind of test runs since they're familiar with what we're considering from the board. So that's why that's the first visit, but we will be kind of developing something as we go. So we chose Coolidge intentionally first because of the timing of our work, the perspectives we had at the school level, and the invitation was given to us. So not good.
Thank you, guys. And I appreciate you guys, just the work that you guys have done. I don't think, I keep saying it, there was so much pushback for a task force. There really was. But you see the relevance because of all the work that has come out. And I just want to say, I really appreciate what has come out of it and the leadership and just all of that, because there was like, people was like, oh, but that's implicit. You don't need a task force. And this group, this body pushed for one. And a lot of great work has come out of it. I think, had we not had this task force and what's happened, there's a lot of things that we are debating, a lot of just would not have risen to the level that it has, so that we give our residents what they need. And so I just want to say you to that particular thing, thank you for your work that you're doing. We will now go to educator excellence with Representative Chang. Hello, Representative Chang.
Sorry, guys.
No problem, sir.
So on our side, we had a panel with representatives from the WTU, AJE, the Charter Alliance, and Empower Ed to inform our draft resolution on special ed PD. And we heard consistent concerns about unclear classroom role definitions, real resource and capacity constraints, and the need for a clear shared vision supported by better data. And this input is shaping the direction of our draft resolution. And zoomed out, I think found the committee panel format to be really valuable for going deeper on complex issues, and would recommend it to other committees to use it more. And thank you, Dr. Johnson Law, for moving this one forward. Also, we'll pass to Jen to give a bit of, get more information on where we are on the vendor search as we continue our priority as a committee on supporting early career educators.
Thank you, Representative Chang. I worked with all the representatives on the committee to develop a scope of work for the focus groups with early educators. And then I worked with Roma and Ian on our budget and operations team on the procurement side. So it's now with the Office of Contract and Procurement. And any vendors can send in questions. So we're working with the budget and ops team and me to answer any questions that vendors may have, and then OCD will choose one that's going to be the amount is over $10,000.
Thank you, Jen, and to Rep. Williams and Rep. Henderson and Dr. Johnson-Lani. Any other points to add?
Thank you for letting me crash your committee meetings. I appreciate you, Representative Chang.
All right, thank you guys. If there's nothing else for Representative Chang and Representative James, we'll move to some of the more, I enjoy how they present. I'm sorry because they do this tag thing, so I love following on the student advisory committee. Just because of just how they present, so you guys are, yeah, it's just, and it moves so seamlessly, it's really smooth, so I enjoy their report. Go right ahead.
All right, good evening, guys. We had our 5th SAC meeting of the school year. We had 48 student members, which is a little less than previously, but I'm sure we will regain. We had obviously the 4 of us, and Mr. Goulet joined us as well. We had some friends from Aussie, our wonderful SBOE staff, and we had some friends from the Education Research Collaborative, including Dara Shaw, who has been helping us through our research projects. Ms. Dinkins and Dara Shaw shared the SAC research timeline before breaking into groups to continue work on their research projects. This month, members focused on using their research questions formed at the previous SAC meeting to finalize how they will collect data. And groups that completed their data collection approaches and instruments will begin outreach efforts this January.
I have the pleasure of introducing Aussie's presentation on the 5-year strategic plan. They gathered information from the SAC members. They asked what every adult should know about students, and members offered a wide range of differing responses, including students' daily struggles, competitiveness, safety, workload, and many other issues. When asked what success looked like for students 5 years after studying pre-K, 3rd grade, and 9th grade, members shared things like having career goals, a solid foundation in reading and writing, and enjoyable experiences with their teachers, friends, overall confidence in themselves, and encouragement from adults.
And lastly, when asked what shouldn't change at their schools when it comes to preparing students for life after high school, many shared things such as resume building, having counselors assisting in college preparation, especially assisting middle schoolers in those developing thoughts, and schools rewarding good teachers. After Aussie's presentation, Representative Goulet asked about feedback and potential volunteers for the state board's planned youth convening events. Many recommended hosting events on weekday afternoons or on Saturday mornings at various schools and recreation centers, and advertising things like food and volunteer hours, which a lot of our students definitely care about. The next SAC meeting will be held on February 9th, and for the only action item we have, students will be continuing to work on their research projects alongside their student representatives and the folks at the Education Research Collaborative.
Are there any questions for students? Representative Williams.
Yeah, thank you all. I'm impressed by the work and the organization, so good job. In terms of the partnership with the research questions, you had mentioned the timeline, but like, what is the actually month by month timeline that to the degree that you have that like available right now?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Okay. We kind of like built it off of like the scientific method. The folks in the Education Research Collaborative are very, very helpful in like getting our like complicated thoughts about various school issues into like actually like actionable items. And so we have finished the research question phase. I think in our last meeting, we talked more about the like instrument of data collection. What are that like surveys? I think our group's planning on like one-on-one like individual interviews to gain like a deeper understanding that way. So I think the timeline looks like through February and March, it's doing the actual going out, collecting of data, sending those surveys out, and then April and May, it's like wrapping up and like finishing the actual like product of said survey, and then in June, I think is the final presentation.
Other questions? Yeah, I have a question, and it's not anything about your report, stuff like that, because I'm looking at the screen. What is basis? What is that stand for? What is school?
This is a debate hoodie in particular that we made, and it's basis hedge is short for hegemony, which is like a lot of debate, like evidence will say like US hegemony prevails, like something, it'll talk about like the status of world, like the world order. So the back it says like inevitable, sustainable, and good, because some cards like evidence will say that like hegemony is inevitable, sustainable, and good. So this
It was just interesting, and I'm sure there are other people that are probably watching.
Yeah.
Going, okay, I see her smiling face, Ms. Reagan, what the heck does that mean? You know, so I had to ask her. that, so thank you. And members that are here. Now, if there's no more questions for our students, we're gonna turn to, our student experience and engagement, and this will be the last person, that last time that he does this report, because he will not chair this committee, because he's moved to weekly, so Representative Goulet.
It's vice president.
Vice President Goulet,
Yeah, thank you so much.
go right ahead.
And I will believe, because following our students is always an impossible task. I cannot live up to that standard, but I'll do my best today to try to wrap it up on high note. So what we did is we did the 2026 youth convening discussion to kick things off. Representative Best talked a lot about the progress we made with MICVA, and I think we are really in good shape. We said the timeline with MICVA. We've got draft dates that we've got as placeholders right now. And we're gonna try to come back and give an update at the next working session with a kind of complete plan for these happenings or convenings that are on, and they'll be here from students about the issues that they feel are important, particularly in the area of safety and supports. Then Representative Colson, to my right, gave a thorough discussion about her plans for a chronic absenteeism early warning system. And we had a great discussion on that. Everybody at the committee agreed we should move forward with a resolution at the next meeting. So I think you're working with Dr. Fleischer on that. And there was a lot of excitement about making sure that as students transition from one school to the next, that some of the data and interventions that were discovered to work didn't get lost in the transition. So that was a great discussion on that issue. I briefly very much talked about the kindergarten age cutoff challenges. I think DCPS has sent something down on policies for kindergarten, which I need to read. I committed to try to bring something forward at the March working session, which I also committed to do today as well. And I want to try to see what the next steps are on this issue with any, because I think a lot of the parents are really nervous because they now have kids going in first grade. Some of them are coming back from a year at Montgomery County public schools because they do not want to have their children traumatized by missing kindergarten. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I'm going to try to get a copy of the UCPS policy and share it with everybody. And then just lastly on this committee, well, I'll put that in new business. Say one of the things that's been going on in business. That's everything, but I'm trying to take questions.
Other questions?
Have we, are there, sorry. The attendance, early warning system. Are we talking about, we reach out to OSSI, about, like supporting this and what's already in place, especially because there might be different ideas and like what they said. Or is part of our resolution, making recommendations to OSSI about things they would need.
The former. So this committee doesn't meet again until March. So we don't meet again we're gonna miss a meeting. So we don't, in that meantime, we're reaching out to OSSI, yes, to get a better understanding. So the answer to your question is yes. And then based on that information, then that will help shape the resolution.
The DME too, possible.
All right. Did I see any more questions for our city committee? I'm going to move now. So are there any external committee updates or reports that someone wants to share? I'm not seeing it. Okay. So next, based on committee preference, on the committee preference form, we do not have any members interested in serving on the environmental literacy. I want to do one final ask this evening. Because we do need to appoint someone. Is there anyone interested in Ozzy's environmental literacy committee?
Can we appoint some of our staff if anybody's interested?
That is an option, and we have discussed that. I've discussed that with our director. Don't overtask yourself. It comes to us first. But if no one, if their plate is full and you feel like you can't fully committed, and that's been some of the reasons why no one has raised their hands. And so, yeah, we can put a staff member on it, you know, fill two up.
Do folks know what it would entail?
I was just gonna say.
Or with somebody like, or what it comes, so
That was gonna be-
on the environmental, the review committee, what is it, 2 years ago, because no one would serve. So as president, I decided, I will go ahead and serve instead of, having the task serve. We had a different board then. In the interim, we have had staff actually, that have somewhat served, but it hasn't met often. The environmental, literacy, the city has an environmental literacy plan. This committee is responsible, for discussing what's in the environmental literacy plan and making any changes. That's what the purview of the committee is.
How often should we do? Was it quarterly? No.
I don't,
I looked at the
Jen
notes.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was Kathleen Hoffman, staff it, but she said about every 8 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Two.
What does it do?
I served on the committee when I was president. Because no one else served. I don't know what they're doing now, because I don't serve on the committee. I have not served on the committee during that time.
Which is general, like what is the purpose of this?
The general purpose of the committee is to, give feedback and any updates on the city's environmental literacy plan. So.
In the survey that we sent around, there was a link that had a description for exactly what the environmental literacy committee did along with all the other things.
Environmental literacy is the stuff that's like how we teach kids about the environment, so kids being literate in the environment. And it does include working with other agencies.
I think I have two, we'll have two that's interested.
Possibly, I'm just considering the tweets, but you
Right,
said
that's it.
every 8 weeks, it's just one person, we can't tag team and have a representative from.
I'd like to have one person. So. Do I have a taker of the representative elected members? Okay,
Jen just put in the chat, the link to the environmental literacy plan, so you can look at it.
raise your hand. Okay, I know, I'm letting you know as well. Okay, thank you, I know. But yes, thank you, Representative Johnson Law, for taking that opportunity responsible for that so much.
Are you guys gonna send me like a link or something?
Me or Director Butler can close the loop, see, and then make sure you're involved in the communication.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, going to also in your great spirit, or you're not going to.
Oh, that was if we didn't.
Okay, I appreciate it. We're gonna go into this, without rules. I would like to ask members if there anything to add to the following list for the business. What's on there currently is performance oversight hearings and testimonies. SR 26-2, appointing representatives to committees. CR 26-3, honoring the late Pierpont Mobley. And recent graduates panel. Is there anything else? And I believe Representative Boulay said that he had something for the business.
So just briefly, like to add to the new business agenda, a discussion and then, hopefully referral of the issue of removing trailers in the education space for schools, and we're trying to get information.
Is there anything else to add to the business? Okay,
I fired it, but I'm not so sure if it's like, it's about, student IDs, and autism. And non-student, right,
student ID.
that's right.
See, was there anything else? Okay, so those two additions to the ones that I named previously. Okay, performance oversight hearings and testimony, Director Hubbard.
So, when we had our leadership, he wanted to know if the board was planning as a board to have testimony at any of the other education. Focuses performance oversight panel, so that they could really stand out for this, stop, not individual testimony. But if you all are planning to do any agency, like board testimony about, particular agencies. DCPS next. When they're at 18. And so there's a public trust school board. UDC deputy mayor. And the public church school board. And I see government, this is on the March 4th. So I see it's March 4th. Public church school board, DCPS, February 8th. UDC, February 20th. So we all want to add any board testimony or.
So just my take on this, one of the things, I feel like it's more appropriate for us to stick to our own performance oversight, when we're doing the performance oversight process as an entity, because it would be odd for us to come in and like say what an agency was doing well as a collective capacity, I feel like. But I'm not going to do that. Now, for budget oversight, we may want to do more individual testimonies there on the agency budgets. Particularly since we've already put a letter out that shows what our priorities are. So we're going to be reacting to the budget and then specifying, what we feel is important. But if you're commenting on like the performance of OSSI with the year, I think we can strange, but it's just not how it is. I mean, those conversations I feel like should be had in meetings that necessarily aren't at a public base.
You and I are at like mine, but I want to hear any other comments.
I'm generally inclined to agree with that.
Just like an air, dirty laundry or we have feeling, that just seems like. Maybe. Any other questions?
I mean, maybe I think of performance oversight, differently, because it's not just complaints. Typically, if we have past resolutions in the year that affect agencies and have things that we say we support, we would like done, whatever. I would assume those are the things that come from the board that would be appropriate to raise at a performance oversight hearing. I would not think it's appropriate to go to DCPS's hearing and say, I don't like aid, not just because that's not true, I like aid, but I don't think that is appropriate. And so I think of performance oversight as what has happened over the last year, that the council should know, period. And so the question is, looking back on the last year, are there things that we have raised and said would be good for the educational landscape that we should be lifting up at these hearings?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll get back to you, keep on that then. I think you changed my mind. So I think with regards to DCPS in particular, some of the concerns that we've gotten around technology come to mind. Some of the things, and it's not necessarily just DCPS based, but I do think this year more than ever, I've gotten more constituent concerns around facilities, and so there's like a DGS component there as well with supporting DCPS schools. That I don't know exactly how to lift up, but would like to support. And so it does change my general viewpoint of what we would say on each, but I think that the tech plan, the Wi-Fi policies, Representative Chang has forwarded a couple things to leadership over the last month around inequitable tech policies and lack of access to computers and internet that I do think we should follow or amplify.
Others?
Well, that sped in there, I get a lot of complaints about sped. But again, just to lift it up, not to bring an agency down, but to be like, this area is in need of support.
Okay. Others?
Well, I'm gonna speak in my individual capacity on this issue, which is gonna be of no surprise to anybody on this, yes. So it is the kindergarten
If
issue.
we're not here with that. So,
And, you know, and obviously, no one is satisfied with the result of that was in, the outcome is also unsatisfactory. So, but like something like that, where there's dissatisfaction, that's, you know, at least known dissatisfaction related to my ward, you know, I will go speak as an individual. They don't think a collective board needs to weigh in on that. And I just, let me just ask our executive director, in the past, have we weighed in on the performance of other agencies? Is that something we've done routinely?
And
Yes.
I'm private, I can't speak to all of the previous, the year before. But, in the time that I've been here since November of 2022, there hasn't necessarily been, oversight testimonies as a collective. Members have testified in their individual capacity. And when they do sign up to do so, the council staff have put them ahead of the other public witnesses to be at the top of the list.
But we also did a lot more testimony and issues
Yeah.
than we have in the past year. So we didn't, our staff was already taken into account from oversight, so that when members would go testify, they would look back and say, hey, the board testified at the teacher retention hearing, this aligned with report, like they would ask Aussie. And so our issues were put on the table in other ways, but that hasn't happened in the same way this year, just because of, you know, how we put things on the table. And so I would look at
I think one thing that we would want to find out is like how much time we can testify, because we're not testifying as an agency.
And they can do the same amount of time as a public witness.
It would just be 3 weekends an agency.
It's just no problem. The biggest thing is that he wants to.
sometimes they can be fine.
Yeah.
On behalf of people.
First, the amount of leaders go projected that.
So their decision.
There was one.
Not a vote, well, not a vote, but like, is this like a together thing where we decide together? Or is this a leadership question where this is leadership decided?
No, I think the board has decided to give board testimony. The leadership will be the ones that read the testimony on behalf of the board, right? The board has decided.
Right, I said, I don't know when, you need a decision now, but maybe it will move us to ask, give a deadline, and see if people have thoughts about what they would have done, and we can decide if it's enough to put forth as a testimony.
I would give a deadline on this Friday, because we are, as a staff, writing our own testimony for the agency and answering our own set of candidates for the same question. So if we have to write a second, I mean, that's fine, we just need to know so that we can put it in the queue. Yeah, so we would, and plus the testimony, DCPS's testimony and the public are a week before our hearing. So that would have to be submitted soon. That would actually be submitted next week. Just even before our stuff is due.
Right, no problem.
Yeah, DCPS is on February 18th.
The night of our vote.
Please, if you're gonna set a time, Friday, read your emails. Put something in there. We can read that there.
President Madison, are members comfortable voting? Like, if we're able to vote today, if we're all here, can we just do it now to give staff direction or that?
SR 26-2, appointing representatives to committees. This resolution will reflect some changes to committee appointments and chairmanships or chairships. For example, Representative Boulay has been elected vice president, so he will therefore be chairing the administrative committee. Thank you to those who have completed the form shared by Director Butler. We will finalize the appointments by February 11th. Again, I appreciate everybody that I've reviewed them this week in our leadership meeting we talked about. So thank you for that. And then finish up our letter side. I'm not trying to make major changes. I just want to make sure that we're always aligned to some of our strategic initiatives priorities that we put forward, put a lot of time on, and just making sure that everybody has time to do what they have committed to do. So that's the reason that I asked again. So thank you for filling that out, and I will say we got 99.9% of responses on that. As far as people chiming in, so thank you. Next thing is CR 26-3, honor the late Pierpoint Mobley. For those who do know Mr. Mobley, he is a giant. 4'5", as far as political world. He's been around, been advisor for many different people. We also served in the White House. His wife, Jeanette, is just a wonderful person. She's also very active in the community, at large, not just in Ward 5. And I attended the meeting, after his passing. We literally had almost every elected official there, bringing comments, talking about it. So I thought it would behoove us because he has always been supportive of so many individuals that we did resolution for him. So I have some narratives and some things like that I'll forward over that I got from Ms. Mobley, and I'll forward those over, but I'll be pushing that forward. Okay. All right. Recent graduate. As a reminder, the February public panel will feature recent graduates and is titled Beyond the Diploma, DC Graduate Reflects. And as of today, the staff still working to confirm panelists. So I wanted to make a final call for members for suggestions, okay? Thanks for writing it, really. We need your suggestions on students to serve on the panel for this. So if you do know someone helpful to the staff and finding panelists, we don't have anyone at the current time for this panel, from my understanding already.
I can give an update. We don't have anyone completely confirmed. We have reached out to Dr. Ramamurthy at Trinity Washington University, and she has identified a couple of students, so we are hoping to confirm one of those. We've also done outreach to Arlen Harrell at DOES, Emily West, I think is Greater Washington Partnership, Tanya Barachi, Federal City Council, the MICVA Challenge, Office of the Student Advocate, and former SAC members. I will say most of the former SAC members that have reached out with interest are, have, gone on the path of a traditional four-year university, out of state, very prestigious universities. So we are particularly looking for students who maybe did not pursue a four-year degree, so they could speak to how graduation prepared them in a different capacity. So if anybody has connections beyond those that we've already reached out to, or knows of a student on a graduate on that pathway, let us know.
Good. Thank
Comment, I don't know if they are still operating, DCPS persists.
They ceased operations.
They ceased, okay.
So
When
I
did
think,
they cease?
they are like no longer taking any more students in, but I actually do know a student that, I think they're going through with this class that is within, college, but they're not taking on any more students. But I actually might be able to recommend, some of that.
Okay. But their office when in operation was to follow graduates,
Yeah.
so perhaps someone can still assist you.
Then also too, maybe like, Aussie's like, their re-engagement center, like they might have some folks who have gone a different way as well. That may be helpful.
So thank you, guys. Please contact the staff or the staff if you come up with someone. Thank you. Now I'm gonna move to the additional ones that we have, new business. The discussion on the removal of trailers, kind of like a permanent building that.
Yeah, so I testified at the DGS performance oversight hearing, for Councilmember Louis George in my individual capacity. And talked about just a number of facilities issues in Ward 3, but then discussed the idea of looking at trailers that have been there for some time. And this is the issue of concern for me, because I think it really shows children how much we value their education if they have to go into a musty smelling trailer to learn as a classroom. For example, at Key Elementary School, there's a trailer that's been there for, I don't even know how long, that is used as their special education. And it's just, I mean, they're making do with the space they have, but we really need to do better on these things. We started using trailers back, I think it was in 2008, when the Office of Public Education Facilities Modernization was created under Alan Liu, and that was the precursor to DGS. Now, the goal of trailers though was quick turnover, because they were doing a modernization blitz and trying to put trailers in as quick swing space so you could get more done fast. And they work great. I mean, it was a really good tool to be able to keep kids learning while you renovated their building into the phase one modernizations. Unfortunately, that's not what trailers are being used for now. Now they, got put in there when the school became overcrowded and are sitting there. So I would like to at least understand the universe of these trailers to learn where they are, how long they've been there, and then we can look at the facilities plan to see if there's any, planned modernizations to get rid of them. But I have heard from teachers that say, some of them would be bad to convert to office space for teachers. Like there was a number of trailers that deal that they said they would like to keep to be able to use as office space. Same thing is true with Jackson Reed, but to use as learning space for children, I don't think we should do that. I think we should put it in permanent space. So the goal that I would like to achieve would be through a letter and then also a resolution on trying to obtain the universe of this. So it'd be two steps. One, we get the universe, and then second, we try to see if we can get these replaced and get permanent buildings in instead of trailers. So what I would ask, be referred to the C committee, that's your choice, Mr. President, is a discussion on a resolution and possibly a letter to focus solely on the issue of getting the universe of where the trailers are and how long they've been there. And then we can go to step two after that. Just for today, I asked would be that be referred to the C committee. And I'm open to any questions or discussion.
Is it time to do the investment facilities plan?
No, that's a good question, because I was pushing and having this debate about whether that was actually considered space at the school. And
I guess part of it.
yeah, I got two different answers. And I mean, I'll tell you, that last facilities master plan, nothing was done to alleviate overcrowding whatsoever.
Answers from.
It was, I think, DME running the meetings, and I attended most of them, but it wasn't, I even attended the one live, that we had in, not a lot of momentum on getting the trailers out. So I think if we can get a two-part process where we at least can then show where they are, how long they've been there, that might increase pressure. And Councilmember Lewis George was interested in getting that material. We had a discussion and she said, you know, when we get it, if we share it with the committee, because that's the committee that would be relevant to that. I know that was a helpful discussion to have. And certainly we would make that public to whoever would want it, and once we receive it.
Thank you. Were there other comments or questions for Representative Goulet and Representative Henderson?
And you're distinguishing between trailers that are permanent or past the life versus swing space trailers.
Well, I'd like to get both in the report. I think we'd be able to tell which are which based on like how long you've been there. Because if we've got an active modernization going on, and there's trailers on site. No argument for that at all. I think that makes perfect sense because it helps then get the modernization done without dragging it over many years or having to do it just during the summers. Now I'm thinking more about the key situation where you got a trailer that's been there and been educating kids in trailers when really they need a larger building. And I think there's probably examples like that throughout the city. I just don't know where they all are because I've only really toured the schools to my.
Other comments or questions for Representative Goulet? So I appreciate your recommendation. I'm going to approve or go with your recommendation and put this in the C committee with a letter and a resolution. Okay.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you.
Now going to Representative Thompson on student ID.
Yes, so recently in Maryland, there was a bill passed. It is actually goes beyond students, but on their ID cards, you can have, I believe in Maryland, you can put a butterfly that says person has autism, and it could also be other disabilities. This is particularly important because of the interaction that folks have with police disproportionately. I know that right now, given PC always has a substantial police presence that is not within our control, but it is even more acute now. I expect this will come before the council soon. And I would like us to be prepared to weigh in if it does come before the council. I will be reaching out to a few people to testify before I don't forget needs a full panel. But I do think it will behoove us to familiarize ourselves with some of the research. Invite people to come to our public meeting to testify and prepare to pass the resolution and weigh in when appropriate as this possibly moves forward for our own jurisdiction.
Yeah, and what would it provide us kind of?
So it would provide a way for you to look at, like, if, so let's say I'm stopped by law enforcement, and the past, I'd say, I don't know how many years, it has been a more visible and vocal conversation about the conversations that certain communities have with their kids who stopped by police. That seems to be a new idea for some people, but it's not a new idea for many people. When you look at the data, it is not only like Black people, but it's also people with disabilities who disproportionately have really negative interactions with the police, but they're not always able to articulate. And so it would be a way for you to see on the ID, which would then force the officer to adjust. Now, of course, there's nothing that solves all the problems, right? So yes, you need training of officers. Yes, you need all the different things. Yes, you need socialization, but at least there is a way for an officer to know, just like they would know when you're in a car accident, if you're an organ donor. Of course, if you're an organ donor, you need surgeons to transplant. You need it to be a match. That doesn't mean though that you don't have a way to identify. Right. So this would give a way to identify in hopes of making those interactions be not so disproportionately bad. And so I'm not asking the board to weigh in or consider this today. I'm more so raising the idea and that this is something that could be potentially coming to our jurisdiction, especially as there's a time when we have a very a high law enforcement presence, and saying that we should familiarize ourselves, with the research. I'm going to invite some to testify at our meetings and hear from them. If necessary, we can refer some things to a committee. But I want us to start thinking about this now, let folks know that this is a possibility so that we will be prepared to weigh in if it comes before council as a piece of legislation.
Thank you, President.
So I just want to speak in full support of what you're talking about, and specifically due to something that I heard about when there was a misguided attempt to get rid of SROs in our schools altogether. And one of the people who came in and spoke about that to me said he had a son with severe autistic needs. And his son had gone outside of the school and was having a very bad day, a very rough situation. And fortunately, the SRO who knew the child, encountered the child out there, knew what was going on. And was able to not only calm the student down, but get him back into school, call parents. But the parents said, if the SRO wasn't there, and it was other public safety officers who encountered his student having that reaction, his child, like it could have gone very differently. So I think something like that, where when an officer can get the idea and realize that this is a student with disabilities or a child with disabilities, or even an adult with disabilities, would be really, I think, helpful in then immediately then getting understanding of what's going on, hopefully a different approach then after that occurs. So you can count me in 100% on that, based on that kind of discussion that I had with that individual.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you. Representative Thompson, I love this. Absolutely love this. I think this goes into what we were talking about earlier in the year, President Patterson, about also like students getting their real IDs, because you're talking about this going on the real ID, or are you talking about their student IDs? Or both? Or both?
I'm talking about real IDs, but I'm essentially saying it is something we can do for IDs, period.
Right. And so with that, I know we were discussing that there's an issue with folks even getting their ID at all. And so maybe we can like combine these efforts, and as we do the different like, the town halls. And that maybe like this is like a topic that we can like put in, like as we do the panels to like include the students. And we just like put this in all together, because a lot of students still need to get their ID in the first place and have issues with documents. So as we're doing all this, I think it would be a great idea to maybe combine forces and combine these efforts and like include it all too.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? I think what we're seeing for the content is a lot of support. I support as well. Like you said, there's no action at this particular time, it's just to make ourselves aware that this is a subject matter that we're going to take up, that we'll be addressing, and we'll be able to speak to it. So thank you for that. And since I don't have to take the action now.
I just want to say, I support it as well.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
remember following the story and how this came to be with the young man, who did not have a great experience. He's still with us, thank God, but I remember his mother pushing for this after this. So I love when we're able to have foresight and do things before they're needed. So I support it as well.
Yes, thank you. I apologize. Any other comments on this? Okay, and there's no other items on the new business, so I come to that point, I will start grabbing folks and smile a little bit. Thank you, members, for your time and engagement tonight. We will next convene at our public meeting on February 18th. Members of the public can visit sboe.dc.gov to learn how to submit and present testimony at our upcoming public meeting. All public witnesses must submit a written copy of the testimony to our staff for the public record. Seeing no further business before the board, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved by Johnson, one second. It was seconded by Senator Wade. Motion has been properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays, abstention? We are adjourned.
Yes, it was disrespectful.
That was.
That was.
They try to stem my